Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Olufemboyede. And I must say this publicly, for the first time, you stick to the time. I was going to prompt you, but you, for the first time ever, have been with you for how many years now? Okay, not to digress, let's move very quickly. Mr. Femboyede has set the stage. And this is where we get a little bit conversational. I know many of you are already putting your thoughts in the chat. But before we get into that, we also want to welcome you know direct thoughts, presentations. I know Mr. Emeka Chime has presentation, so we'll take him after Madam Elyon, Christiana. So Madam Elyon, please, you have the next 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. I want to start by saying thank you for putting this together. This is my first rodeo here and I'm enjoying it so far. So the topic before us today is to discuss balancing domestic consumption needs as against international trade opportunities. I want to speak from my heart as a farmer, you know. Um, I want to start by discussing the topic where I want to major on is the problem facing me as a farmer that will prevent me from meeting these needs of probably taking our produce abroad. So let me speak from my heart. And the first major concern we have as a farmer, any farmer on this webinar could tell you that the first major problem is reliable workers. I have a 20-acre farm. I hope you can hear me. I have a 20-acre farm and I can only open 10 acre at a time because I don't have workers. Most of the workers we get are from Cotonou, and because of our Naira that is almost like nothing to them, they don't want to come here to work again. So we are having problems with where to get reliable workers, not the ones that you think they're on the farm, but they will run away with everything you have on the farm before they break. So that's one of the major issues facing farmers at this point, workers. And then another thing is lack of funding. I thank God that I'm able to fund my farm by myself in my own little way. But what about others? We need investors. We need people that will encourage even younger generation to enjoy farming. You know, if you don't have the means, you really farmer now we want to make farming business an elite thing in Nigeria that only the ones that are rich could pump money into farming. And then also, I as a person would like a situation where we can have grants. If there's a place where we can go to. I won't have to go to a bank that's my kidney and my liver because before they can give me 500,000. Also, you won't believe that beginning of this year, I bought a packet of Efia pepper seed for 16,800. I went back to buy the same pack and it was 58,000. How do I balance that? You know, so these are areas we need to look into: the cost of the seeds, the cost of equipment. The dollar goes up, seed goes everywhere, the equipment too goes everywhere. So we need to look into all these things. It's kind of it hampers production. If I can't produce food for my immediate community, why will I be thinking of taking it elsewhere outside the country? So if my child is hungry, will I be caring about my neighbor that a child is crying at midnight? So we need to look at all these things at the moment, you know. And then infrastructure. I was so moved to tears some weeks ago when a friend of mine at Ogere Market brought his cucumber and cabbage from the north, and it rained. So he was able to salvage just 30% of what he brought from the north. So that is where we are at the moment. These are very ingrained problems confronting each and every one of us. And then a friend lost almost 5 acres of pepper because of lack of reliable labor. They took his money and ran away and left his farm with how much can you do as a person? We talked about security, you know, there are people that will probably chase you off your farm, you know, if you don't have adequate. There was a time I had to go to my farm with security and things like that. And then decided I don't want to live my life like this. This is what I enjoy doing. I'm not if I didn't read agricultural science in school. I'm someone that have passion for farming. I want to know what I eat. I want to grow what I eat. That's the reason why I went into farming, and that I shouldn't be afraid of somebody coming to chop either my leg or my hands off because they want to graze on my farm. So these are areas that need urgent attention. If you can, like a friend of mine that brought was bringing his product from the north, we have temperature control trucks. We need to be thinking about that. The guy that is exporting pineapple from Ghana to the Netherlands, how is he taking them there? How is he controlling the temperature? Is he getting there? Is he getting there to the Netherlands half rotten, not consumable? So these are areas we need to look into as to move farming. Farming is no longer the backyard farming that our grandparents did. Farming is evolved already. So we need to be prepared for the challenges and find a way of solving these challenges. And then most of us in Nigeria were seasonal farmers. Everybody is on the farm because it's raining. But think about it. We had July break. It used to be August break. But we were expecting the rain stopped on our side 3 weeks ago. So how do we combat that? Irrigation, which is expensive. To sink a borehole is expensive. And we want to farm around the year. For us to be able to meet international trade opportunities, we need to be farming around the year. In advanced country like Canada, they have silos. Canada, they have silos when they can buy grains from the farmers and put it in silos. You are not under pressure to sell at that moment because you know that you can give it to the government and have silos where they're going to keep them. So if you want to produce tomatoes out of season, where do you keep it? How do you preserve it? So these are areas that needs looking into, and then we need researchers, technology, help of technology in farming, awareness. We are people that can develop disease-resistant seeds, that can help farmers. We deal with a lot of I farm tomatoes. Tomatoes can drive you crazy. Today, everything looks good on the farm. By tomorrow, half of your crop could be gone due to one infestation overnight. So we need a place where we could get advice, help, awareness on how to raise disease-resistant farm. I have agronomists, I have consultants that come to the farm and I pay an arm and a leg to bring them. So most people are not able to do that. So what happened? So these are things that could, impair us from reaching that place where we want to take food abroad, where we want to be the giant. And Nigeria, we have the capability, we have the weather, we have the land, we have everything on our side that we could be the food basket of Africa, but we have this problem confronting us. It's an uphill task, and I believe we can do it if we have the resources, if we have all the help that can help us to reach this I'm looking for a better word to use at this moment. So we can do it. It's doable. We can export outside when every other thing is in place, when we are okay. That's where I'm going.
Great. Thank you very much. And like someone just put in the chat, you indeed have been speaking from your heart. I want to say a very big shout out to Madam Jacquelyne for putting in bullet points, like capturing very succinctly all the points you've been making. But to just drive that, to just connect that very, very, very clearly, I would like to invite Mr. Adigun. And I do this, Ahmed Bolaji Adigun. I do this because I know that you raised some topics or some issues that he might want to respond to directly. So, Mr. Adigun, for the next 10 minutes, Madam Elyon talked about raising improved disease-resistant seed. I know you've been talking about GMOs and what that means. She talked about mechanization. She runs a 10-acre farm. How can she run that effectively? Or how can mechanization help to scale that up? She talked about a number of other issues. You probably want to directly respond to some of them, and also within those 10 minutes, make some of your presentation. Adigun, please, the floor is yours, Mr. Adigun.
Thank you very much. I was just so emotional as Madam was speaking because, as I've said, when you see a farmer, you will know one. By what they say, you will definitely know one. And as I always say, majority of our problems are known and the solutions are not far away from us. How do we do it? How do we do it? Everything Madam has said, I've said it, can be solved by mere cluster farming. Even as an investor that you have billions of dollars, it will be practically impossible to invest in Nigeria agri sector to provide solution. I'm not talking about investing directly, like to provide solution and get reward for every bit of your investment because of our approach. And I'll be very practical, the way she has been practical with example of what she's doing. Just imagine, what is she doing? She's just doing, she said 20 hectares. If I divide it by 2.5, that is just 4, if I'm not mistaken, that is, I think that should be 8 hectares. That is the whole 20 acres. And me, that I'm into mechanization, Madam want to call me that, Ahmed, come and help me do my plow and harrowing. And my distance to our farm is about 100 kilometers away. By the time I started asking her to give me money for diesel or low bed to transport the tractor to our farm, she will look at it. It doesn't make any economic sense for her. So definitely she will either go by hand or every other means. And let me quickly say this. The only way, sometimes it amuses me when I see, it is normal because the whole world is now global and we need to talk about export. We cannot be in isolation. But I continue to say that Nigeria is not even feeding itself conveniently. When I mean conveniently, see, the fluctuation in price of food is solely because we are not producing enough. And I will give you examples, a lot of examples. During the season, how much do we buy a kg of maize? During off-season, how much do we buy? And the only business principle that will never fail and that will stand the test of time is the basic simple of supply and demand. If you are not having enough, definitely those who have will take advantage of that process. And she was talking about silos, talking about all this can only be captured in a cluster farming. Even if it is a storage facility, imagine having, like, I'm just saying, for instance, like 200 hectares of tomato farm in a place. And somebody took an advantage of that. Okay, all of you will harvest at the same time and you cannot go to the market at the same time. Okay, let me provide a storage facility for you. I'll provide this. You bring your tomato in, save it there. Anytime you want to go at a price, anytime. Same goes for grains. How many farms in Nigeria can boast of silos? How many farms? Even the ones that we have are redundant because we don't produce enough, not to talk of putting in those silos. So she was talking about cost of labor. You see, it is very funny that even we as a farmer, we want to operate as the level at which every other sectors are operating in terms of way of life and everything, definitely these laborers too, we need to upgrade their life. And the only way and means of their livelihood is to get reward in terms of royalty money for work they have done. So if inflation occurs, definitely they will definitely increase their price of labor. And mind you, the efficiency most time is less than 50%. But when we started, when we focus our energy on cluster farming, and let me give you an example why I continue to say this. I did not just jump into mechanization or refurbishing of tractor, ironing of tractor. I farmed for complete 5 years. It was failure upon failure, despite the fact that my farm to the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, the only federal agency that should be in charge of mechanization in Nigeria, could not service my own need. My farm to Encamp is not up to 10 kilometers. Imagine if that agency that is as close to me could not serve my own need. How do they want to serve the need of somebody in Benue State or Maiduguri? So it becomes, I planted soya beans, and right in front of me, over 50% of my soya beans shattered on the field. No way. I was like, is this how I have to go to other farmers? So I look at it. You have the same problem. This person also have the same problem. And then I said, okay, maybe I will just set up a farm for demonstration to teach people how to cultivate. Why I buy old machine? Because of funding, I'll have to buy sometimes old machine, fix it, and start giving out for ironing, to the extent that I am the first person in the whole of Nigeria that owns the biggest combined harvester for the purpose of a farmer, not for my personal use. So that but if you look at it, if somebody asks me that he wants to invest in the same venture, I will definitely tell him that don't do it. Because imagine taking combined harvester. You cannot take combined harvester by road. When it is, you have to take a low bed, and you look at how many hectares is this person harvesting. 50 hectares. You are already telling him to pay 2.5 million to take it there or take it back. So it's only on 300 hectares.
I jump in there, Mr. Adigun. Can you also share a little bit of thoughts around this improved disease resistance seed, GMOs, as other people would like to call it? Maybe in like 2 minutes, and then we'll move to the next speaker, please.
Yeah, you see, for GMO, as I've always been saying, I don't have issues with GMO because definitely it will help in areas of yield, disease resistance. But how do you tell somebody who is not making return on investment, judging from Nigerian factor, to rely solely on seed he cannot replant? So these are my fear. GMO has its advantage in terms of disease resistance or every other thing, but we do not have what it takes for you to get the efficiency to get the required yield out of that GMO. Now, if by mistake we planted GMO and it took over, let's say 90% of our seed demand, it means farmer that if we still go by the approach we continue to use, it means farmer will continue to be in poverty because you are not making required yield, and every year in year you have to depend on seed from the seed producer that is not even in our own shop. Probably majority of GMOs are imported. So these are my favorite. And in Nigeria, let me just so that people will understand, we have hybrid seed that the yield potential is as much as 8 tons, 7 tons. But I want farmers in Nigeria, I doubt if 2% of farmers planting maize in Nigeria get as much as 3 tons per hectare. So if we cannot utilize the potential of the current one we have, that we have the capability of replanting, how do we now tell the same people to plant GMO? And mind you, majority of these things are open pollination. By the time they cross, if you planted GMO in your own farm and this person did not plant, by chance or anything, if you are planting maize, it might cross. So you are already taking food away from that farmer, because probably the next year he will not be able to plant that seed he has been using. And it do not make return on investment for him to boastfully say, I will buy GMO seed. But if you have the working mechanisms that will make you utilize the potential of the said GMO, then I have no problem with it. I don't know if I answer your question.
Please take the floor, Mr. Emeka Chime.
Thank you so much. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, crystal clear.
All right. So I think I'm not going to spend too much time because I think a couple of the points that I was going to raise had already been mentioned by, I think it was Madam Elyon when she was speaking passionately from the perspective of a farmer, because I've always also been of the perspective that we need to achieve food sufficiency. We need to feed ourselves, before we start to consider exports. And I'm not saying that exports don't have all the benefits, of, helping us with a balance of payment position, maybe even potentially helping with our Forex and exchange rate issues. But I think we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder, right? If you go out on the streets currently and you hear what has been happening for the past 2 days, the recurring chances is either fuel subsidy, which people don't understand very much, or hunger. So I think we need to solve the hunger issue, right? As a primary step before we, even begin to look at exports. But that being said, obviously, my slides are also going to look at some of the initiatives, especially through the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, that farmers can sort of leverage to boost their earnings. So just brief overview of the agricultural sector. As we all know, Nigeria is blessed, with vast arable land, and agriculture remains the backbone of our economy, contributes about 22% to our GDP, and employs over 36% of our labor force. It used to be the highest employer of labor until the services sector took over recently. So agric in Nigeria is divided into 4 main aspects. So you have the crop production, you have fishing, livestock, and forestry. Crop production has been the highest subsector, accounting for about 90% of the entire agric sector. And so when you look at Nigeria's agric sector, you can choose to see the issues. You can also choose to see them as potential, right? Because if, the government really looks at, the potential that we have in terms of our viable ecological zones. So Nigeria is divided into different zones that are suitable for different crops, different breeds of livestock to be, reared. That's one potential that we can even use as a selling point in terms of attracting FDI. Our youthful population, there were commentary that came earlier about how to actually encourage them to farm. I think this is something that, the government should be deliberate about in terms of, bringing up some of those, orientation programs, right? That are not just random, food is scarce, go and start a farm, that we've been seeing that rhetoric recently. It's really a deliberate program from the schooling system and all of that to encourage our teeming population to consider farming, as a viable profession. Potential to expand the industry through forward linkages. So most of the way we practice agriculture is currently at the, should I say, crude level. Nigeria doesn't benefit from a lot of the upside in the value chain when you talk about, processing agricultural crops, right? So there's that potential for us to, set up processing plants and all of that, so that that way we don't just play at that crude level. I was reading an article at some point that says the contribution, so people that maybe export cocoa, for example, from Ghana, the rewards that they get is less than 10% of the entire rewards that can be gotten, obviously, from, the entire finished product of chocolate, right? So, and that's why many of these countries are looking to actually set up, manufacturing plants and all of that that can, help them to get that upside from playing in the later stages of the value chain. And our trade deficits, right? We also see that as export opportunities. Now, I thought to just show some graphics in terms of, how agriculture is in Nigeria. So currently, Kaduna, Taraba, Benue are the biggest agricultural producing states, based on the percentage of their population, that participate in agriculture. In the second tier, you have states like Niger State, Nasarawa, Kogi, and even Enugu. And then you go down to, Kwara, Osun, Ondo, like you can see, and this data was gotten from Federal Ministry of Agriculture, and I thought it was quite interesting to share. But on the flip side, states that, consume most of what is produced, of course, this will be characterized by, states with high population, high purchasing power. And on the screen, you can see states like Lagos, Oyo, Delta, Rivers, Kano, based on the analysis that was done as the highest consumers of produce, followed by the states in red. So you can see a lot of the states, Bauchi, Kaduna, Ogun, Osun, Ondo, Edo, Kogi, and the rest. And then the rest of the states don't spend up to 500 billion per annum on food purchased. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that there can be a disconnect. And when I say disconnect, what do I mean? And somebody was already speaking to that point earlier in terms of infrastructure. So some of the things that even cause the prices of food to be higher than they usually are is the food loss, wastages, that I think Madam was speaking to earlier. The inability to have those infrastructure that can store and preserve this food to be in proper states for consumption. And which is why it's only in Nigeria that we have the whole, it's tomato season, it's something season, we should have, those infrastructure that can stabilize the prices all year round, as opposed to, wastages occurring such that we can't store for, seasons where they are dry, right? And that's also part of what increases the prices for Nigerians who already spend over 50% of their income on food. And so to make up for that shortage, we have to depend on imports. As you can see, over the longest period, we've imported way more than we've exported. And the gap has been increasing, if you can see from the screen, up to 2020. I couldn't get more recent reliable data, but as at 2020, our deficit was already above 1 trillion. In fact, it was about 1.4, 1.3 trillion in terms of our food trade deficits, right? And so when you look at how agricultural exports increased, from 270 billion in 2019 to 322, but the imports went even way higher, to 1.7 trillion, making us have, in 2020, the highest deficits that we've had. So we continue to remain a net food importer. And, like I said, the deficit rose from 689 billion in 2018 to 1.3 trillion in 2020. Right. So what are the things that we can do in terms of closing this gap, right? So enhancing productivity, and I like the points that was made around more research to be done in looking at seeds crops that are disease resistant, almost even climate resistant, and all those kinds of things, right? So that, we can have more viable harvests. Supporting smallholder farmers. Smallholder farmers are the backbone, and they continue to need support in terms of financing, in terms of, provision of tools, really, to, support the guys that are the backbone of the country, in terms of our food production. Investing in value addition and agro-processing. I said this earlier. I don't think that we should we'll just have the same problem like we have with crude oil, right? We invest, we extract crude and then we export at crude oil level, but then we have to import, refined petroleum at very premium price, right? Which we then have to borrow or take, from other sectors to pay for, right? And that's almost the same problem we're going to have if we focus on, exporting, especially exporting at the basic level, rather than exporting, rice or beans in bags. Is there a way we can, add value? That way we're also creating employment in that value chain and getting more, of the potential income. Then leveraging trade agreements from recent AFCFTA developments that have happened in Africa. We see recently, I don't know if you saw that on the news, some Nigerian companies participated in the first exports from Nigeria under AFCFTA. And what does that mean? It means that Nigerian farmers now have access to, a market of about Africa's GDP is about, recent data, more than 3.4 trillion rather, based on GDP, and about 1.3 billion population-wise. So farmers and, other players in that space can leverage this treaty as a way to expand their market and reach, other countries. And what the AFCFTA does is that it removes import duties from exports from Nigeria when they get to those countries, because trade among African countries accounts for one of the lowest. In fact, the quantity of trade between Africa and other continents is obviously higher than, the trade, within Africa. There are a lot of issues that portends. I don't know if you saw on the news, I think it was Dangote that was speaking about how he, as the richest man in Africa, he needs to obtain 35 passports to travel around Africa, while, a Frenchman that is the CEO of Total doesn't even need as much. In fact, sometimes he mentioned that, to obtain, 35 visas, not passports. To obtain visas, they ask him to provide his bank statements, and that's the richest man in Africa that we're talking about. And so, as a matter of fact, I don't think trade can, and that's a statement that's credited to Akinwumi. He mentioned that trade is not done in a vacuum. It's people that trade. So apart from the fact that you need connectivity, you also need people to be able to freely move from one place to another if you want to encourage trade. So Africa cannot sit down and say they want to encourage trade when, to move to, to get a flight to, for example, Kenya is probably more expensive than a flight to somewhere in the Middle East, right? So as African countries, if this treaty is to give, all the member countries benefits that it has, we need to seriously think about connecting our people better. And brings me to a report around the Africa Visa Openness Index survey that I just came across, and I thought to share it because it shows that there's some progress, right? In Africa, about the highest index score of 0.485 was achieved in 2023. And how did they get this score? They look at countries that allow, travels without visa or with visa on arrival and the rest. And over time, a lot of African countries are beginning to open up. As a matter of fact, Rwanda, Benin Republic, Gambia, and Seychelles are the only African countries that have visa-free travel to everybody in Africa. So to those countries, you don't need to even get visas. Just just drive in or fly in, right? And ECOWAS was also given a high score of 97% because ECOWAS is a region where you can travel to different countries also with your ECOWAS passports. But like I said, more still needs to be done in terms of free movement of people if we're to encourage trade under the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. So
as we move
just
on,
to wrap
up, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm wrapping up. So just to wrap up, yeah, so like I said, we need to basically feed our people before we then start thinking about exports. And these things need to be done creatively. We need to have private-public partnerships that are in the interest of the people and not in, minority interests. And we need to target infrastructure in terms of road, decongesting the ports, and also security challenges that hamper the free movement of food from rural areas to where they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We're running out of time. I must say thank you again. Please feel free to put direct comments, reply with emoji to Emeka Chime for that very, very useful, very eye-opening presentation. Like I said, we're running out of time. And we still have Madam Yawa before I see all the hands up and I see in the chat that many people want to speak. But please and please, let us get Madam Yawa's presentation and then we will open up the floor and we all can then converse and then get to somewhere, get a very strong takeaway from the conversation today. Madam Jacquelyne Yawa, the floor is yours. You have the next 10 minutes. If you can do it in less, that would be great.
That's fine. So thank you very much. And once again, for the opportunity. I am not going to be repeating a lot of things that have been said, and I am just going to go through to the recommendations on most of the things and just focus on what it is that I really want to bring out. So to be fully declared, I don't speak the English. What I do is I totally tell everybody this. I am a market woman and I see things from those lens. I'm an advocate, and that's the perspective that I'm going to see things from. So I'm going to be looking at opportunities that we can unlock, and it's for us to step back and see whether we can do all of that. So we've had all the challenges that agriculture in Nigeria comes with, low productivity, lack of access to financing. We've heard all of that. So I would not go to that. And of course, there's one bit that was stepped off, which is the quality of the produce that we do. Does it meet international standards? So I have worked for a multinational, and I always say to people, produce for the market. So you don't start with yourself in mind, you start with the market. So there's also the challenge around quality. I won't be going so much into all of this because I've got very limited time. So what I will do is just pick out the key things that are important to me. So why agriculture? Agriculture is a low-hanging fruit, and I've always believed that it is one of the things that can catapult us from a consuming economy to a producing economy. All we need to do is build ecosystems that are functional and work for it, because it contributes 21% of our to Nigeria's GDP. There's something going on. Someone's writing, I don't know what that is, and employs over 70% of the rural population. And I wanted to note this. I know Emeka said the service industry employs more people now. I don't know if people live more in the urban areas, because I always say to people, Nigeria is not Lagos. It is the corals of Guyuk and the creeks in Bayelsa. So trade security, how do we balance domestic consumption needs with international trade, especially now that we're currently experiencing a food crisis bill? And Emeka had mentioned we're in a deficit position as it relates to our balance of trade. So my own question would be, so why agriculture? Let's do a comparative analysis. Why do we need to balance it? Truth be told is you can't stop people from exporting. You can't stop people from importing, except of course if there is a ban on certain things. And protectionism and nationalism is something that we should do around agriculture. And so I was very sad when I saw that there was a lift on import duties for imported food. If it's interim, it's fine, but someone on the platform, whilst we're discussing, said interim or long-term, it is destructive to our own local economy. So the music industry, the film industry, the banking sector has done this. Truth be told is that our local consumption for the music and film industry is what has fueled the global success that we have today. Same thing with banking. Look at Access Bank, look at Zenith Bank on the African continent. It is because some people have been tenacious enough to say, look, we will do this. I agree that all of these is in the service-related industry, but take film, for instance. If they had not gone through that metamorphosis that they had to go through, they wouldn't be where they are today. So the economic implications of this is someone's mentioned it earlier on, infrastructure needs, as well as policy support. I think the first speaker mentioned the ATA from Akinkunmi. I am still a big advocate of that. I do not agree that it should even be tweaked. Rather, we should actually implement those things. So for us, it is the question of when a new government comes, you jettison it. See what was done with cassava. Look at what President Obasanjo did with cassava. If we had followed in that trajectory, I don't think we will be here today. There's something going on the screen. I don't know where this is coming from, but I would just move with it. So I'll push off all of this because it's not necessary, and I'll go straight up to the three things I like to do. So I like to pick three things. So I'm picking cocoa, I'm picking cassava, and I'm also picking, I don't know what this mark is. And I'm also picking the hides and skin, which is leather. So of course, we all know that cocoa contributes about 10% of the non-oil exports in Nigeria. We currently are the fourth in the continent, and the prices last year and the year before has been very good. It's been a boom. But the question would be, how sustainable is that? And are we ready? And then what I'll do is do a comparison of other countries, and we will ask ourselves, what is the potential in here? What is it that we can do? And one thing I would like to stay here is I had challenges with data. So MBS gives you a different data, different websites give you different data. So for instance, here you can see CBN said we exported 786. But if you go somewhere else, I saw it was 800 and something million dollars in terms of cocoa export earnings for Nigeria. So this is cassava. This is the one that I enjoy the most. Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava in the world. Subsequently, we would see how we compare to other countries and what we have earned. I don't think our challenge, I agree, our challenge is production, yield, but I think IITA has done a lot with cassava. And if we're the biggest and the largest in the world, I do not understand why our earnings is just a meager amount. You'd see it later on, I think 100 million in a market with potential for much more. So the next would be leather. This
While
is
you
not...
change to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Can you stop sharing and reshare so we have a clear screen? We would not want to miss out on some of this data. So you can now
Okay, that's fine.
that is fixed.
Let me do that now. Okay.
And while you do that, please, let's keep the chat going. If there are questions.
Okay, so the next would be, I'll pick the hides and skin industry. So here we are, we're not top of it, but at least it is something that I wanted to do because sort of it represented the northern parts of the country. Cocoa represents the west, cassava more or less the east and the south, and cassava can actually be grown everywhere. So I was trying to do DEI here. You can forgive me for that, but I felt it was important. So the derivatives that we can get from all of our produce. So someone has mentioned that most of our things go out in the raw form, and therefore we can't continue to act in that manner. Someone mentioned about Ghana, and you would see why Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire earn more from their cocoa is because they have built industries around those farming communities, you know, to tap into it, to take it from one, not just in its raw state. So I know there is a woman in Ibadan or your state that does sorbitol from cassava, and she's the one that is supplying Nestle. So that's the kind of thing, but she did that She raised herself from the ground. I don't know which language to use now. By the straps of her boots. That's what she did. And if you don't have that tenacity, if you don't have that passion, you will definitely, drop your boots and say, look, I can't do this anymore. And you know that the millennials, let's be real with ourselves, and Gen Zs don't have the kind of tenacity, or they have a different kind of tenacity than we did. And so we really need to put some thoughts into those economic agro-processing hubs around our agri-producing communities. So there's several derivatives that can be gotten from cocoa, but Nigeria just, processes only 30% of it. And you can see for anybody that is here, so my own task here is to open your eyes to the opportunities in this ecosystem for you to begin to look at it and how can you unlock it. It is mentioned that by 2026, the chocolate market in Nigeria will be 678 million naira. $1 million. So do you want to be part of that? What is it that you can do? I know some people have been in this space for a while, but then you can also come into that space. Beyond chocolates, there are other derivatives, like the cocoa butter, the cocoa powder, and the cocoa liquor that is used in confectioneries and bakeries. And that's what you can actually export, because what is happening is we send out the raw cocoa to Europe or to Malaysia, as the case may be. They process those, and those companies in Malaysia are actually owned by people in England, and then they process, and it's that processed products that they then now send to America, because I think America is the biggest in terms of cocoa, in terms of the chocolate market. But those cocoa pods or those cocoa beans are actually brought from Nigeria. So let's look at cassava. Cassava has fantastic derivatives. You've got starch, you've got sorbitol, you've got so many of them. And what I just want to note out here is that it is mentioned that the derivatives and the market value is 1.8 billion. Cassava starch alone, for industrial pharmacies. And this market in Nigeria is 6.8. So this is where that question comes in, balancing. And I don't have the figure. Our market there's a potential for starch for 6.8 billion. It's projected by 2028. I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, Akwana Atashi. Before you know it, that's how they say it in Yoruba, isn't it? Before you know it, 2028 will be here. I remember when they said it 2020, by the year 2000, we're in 2024. So this is the opportunity that is in the market for cassava starch. Are we going to continue to just consume cassava, or can we make the most of it? The same thing is applicable to hide and skin derivatives. Most of it ends up as leather. In the Nigerian market, it's a 1.5 billion footwear market. And according to NEPC, 900 million of that footwear, out of that footwear alone was accountable for that. Something that was very interesting to me was when I saw that traditional medicine was also involved in hides and skin. But the thing about this hides and skin is we always joke around where I worked before in Nursal, where they would say Pomo versus Louis Vuitton. I hope I pronounced the Louis Vuitton correctly. We eat so much Pomo. That's the truth. Pomo is actually more expensive than leather for exports. You can check that out. So I'm just going to do another component to all of this when we are balancing local consumption with export is waste management. If we do not factor this in properly, we might not even be having this produce in a few years because of greenhouse emission. So it is important that we also look into that. So in Nigeria, approximately 6.4 million tons of cassava peels are generated annually, and the cocoa pods, about 75% of them are classified as waste, amounting to about 2 million tons annually. So for me, I'm saying to us here, what can we do with this waste that we can convert into Naira and Kobo? It might even be for exports. Are we even knowledgeable enough to take advantage of those things. So analysis of Nigeria's production with other countries, this is what I really wanted to look at, and then go straight to the implementation. So comparing Nigeria's production volumes of cocoa, cassava, leather with other countries. So if you can see here, so let me just do the summary. I've got the summary table. So so you can see here, the annual export for Nigeria is 300 metric tons. We earned about 700. Cote d'Ivoire was, these are all SICA, please, 2 million metric tons, over 5 billion was earned in dollars. So my question would be, yes, if you want to do a straightforward extrapolation, it is still too much. I am very sure, let's take it, we're closer to Ghana. Let's leave Cote d'Ivoire out of it. We're closer to Ghana in terms of cocoa. It is because Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana have provided those agro-processing hubs to work with them such that they're getting better value. So long and short of it is that we need to transition from just being a baseline produce exporting country into a value add. And that can only happen if there's an enabling environment, both from the federal government and the subnationals. I know my recommendations were mostly for the federal government, but I know that the subnationals can take advantage of this. Look at cassava, 59 million metric tons, world leader, but we actually earned only 100 million in terms of exports. I know the rest would have gone to food, so that's the food security component of it. But a lot of that would also have gone to waste. Thailand only does half of what we do.
Pardon me, to also wrap up in the next 2 minutes, if you can, please.
I can do that. So let me go straight to my recommendations. So first, improve infrastructure for local manufacturing exports. We've got all of that story here. So my own question would be, please, companies, MDAs cannot continue to work in silos. There's a need for them to work collaboratively to ensure that the ease of doing business is better. So I heard the story where someone said, I'm coming to sink a borehole in a village. And the person said, sink a borehole in a village. I don't need your borehole. All I need is for you to give me a feeder road. You give me the feeder road and I will sink 20 boreholes. That was a farmer who knew what he was saying. So enhancing market access and networking for SMEs in agriculture. So Mrs. Elyon and all the other agricultural and agro-processors, this is what they're looking for. Trade fairs, networking partnership programs, digital market access, and capacity building workshops. And then finally, promoting local content utilization in Tier 1 and Tier 2 manufacturing companies. So the large multinationals should use local content. So you should be using sorghum or using Nigerian maize rather than import maize from the US, because it is only then that you can develop local capacities to meet international standards. I know Guinness, where I worked, did a brilliant job with this. I don't know about other multinationals. But one thing that was lacking was on the other African markets, and I'm glad the tax master when I say tax master, I don't mean it in that sense. The tax expert is here. So Emeka, when you're having those conversations, tell them that there should be incentives for use of local raw material in manufacturing, whether it's for an SME or it's for a Tier 1 company. Ghana was getting incentives for all of Ghana and Kenya, and every other African market was getting some form of rebate for using local content. But Nigeria was not benefiting from that. We pushed and pushed and pushed, but nothing happened. The only way you can actually grow the manufacturing sector, for them to plow back, is for us to support the people that do the actual production, not the paper, not portfolio contractors or companies. On that note, I'd like to say thank you. And these are my references. I'm sure I'll share these later. Most of these are not my thoughts. I just put them together. Once again, thank you for listening. Hope I didn't rush you through.